You know the vibes. Welcome back to another episode of the Hoop Genius podcast brought to you by NBA 2K25. It's myself, Mooncey, alongside me as always, Mr. BJ Armstrong. I want to shout out by giving BJ a shout out on this
Oh,
new
well.
schedule we on up at 6 a.m. every day to record this show. I want to say how much I appreciate you, B.
Oh
Uh,
man,
but
it's
I,
we appreciate you,
I,
the basketball community demands it, and we have to give the people what they want.
we
We
have
have to
to.
give them what they want.
We have to. Well, the Celtics gave me what I wanted. Continued their undefeated start to the season, despite the refs trying their best to prevent that from happening. With a nice win over the Milwaukee Bucks, where Peyton Pritchard caught absolute fire. But the biggest story last night for me was Paolo Banchero, a superstar performance. He's really
Yes.
this season, I think, making a leap. He finished with 50 points, the first 50-point game of the season, 13 rebounds, 9 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal. And I'm doing a breakdown of this on YouTube. You'll be able to check that out later on the Hoop Genius YouTube channel. But BJ, what did you see from Mr. Banchero last night in a close win for the Orlando Magic, but a great win nonetheless?
Well, with his patience on the offensive end, you can see not only the team taking a jump, which they took last year. You can see the fact that he now understands when to shoot and when to pass. And for a young player, I suppose that is probably the most valuable lesson, especially when you are the first option. When you are the first option, you have an opportunity to shoot anytime you want to shoot. And now he is picking and choosing. Last night he got it going. I happened to watch that game last night. He was very patient on the offensive end.
Well, I was watching the Celtics, and then I saw like he had 37 in the first half. I thought, all right, cool. I got to fire up this one.
I mean, what a terrific start. But we said it last year, and then you look at it now, and I don't think you can say this anymore. They are ahead of schedule. This is who they are. Mr. Banchero is here. They just signed Suggs to a nice long extension,
He dropped 25 and 7 last night as well.
and you can see now that they believe in what they're doing. So, the Magic are here now, and Mr. Banchero, he's letting everyone know that he can score, and when you have someone that can score like this, okay, and don't forget about
France.
the Franz and the Wagner kids down there, and Wendell Carter and Caldwell Pope, and so they've quietly gone about their business. Give them credit. I still remember that draft when
Jabari Smith, Paolo, Chet was the top
Chet and all
three.
these guys were here. I want to give the Magic credit because it wasn't clear cut. That draft wasn't clear. Well, at least from my perspective, it wasn't clear cut.
So
Yeah,
that draft was an interesting one because I thought all along Paolo's going to be the clear number one pick. And now of ESPN, but formerly of FanDuel Sportsbet, Mr. Shams Charania decided to start tweeting that Jabari Smith was going to be the number one pick. Um, Maybe potentially allegedly to manipulate the betting odds. And then Paolo ended up being the number one pick anyway. That's why there was some confusion ahead of that draft.
I remember talking to a lot of executives, and and this is off record, and I remember talking to a lot of executives, and normally you'll have a consensus. When I say a consensus, 70% of the people
Like when
you speak
Zion's
with.
going number one or
Yes,
LeBron's going number
yeah.
one,
You may
Wemby's going number one.
hear a couple people may say, hey, such and such, but it wasn't a consensus in that draft who was the number one pick. And I want to give the Magic credit because I called them immediately after the draft and just asked me to explain the process. And the reason being, Mo, is because I think now in the scouting department, it is more and more difficult because the players are younger. You only get a sample size to have to draft Apollo Banchero. You don't get a chance to see him for 2 or 3 years. You have to draft him 30 games in the collegiate level here in the United States anyway. And then you draft these players. So he's a certified scorer.
Do you see the LeBron comparisons?
No, he's not that.
A big, strong athlete at the forward position who can pass, rebound, and score the basketball, I guess is what it boils down to. But, like the final play of that game, the game winning shot came from Paolo throwing that behind the back pass to Suggs, who then made the assist to the corners, Anthony Black, who also, by the way, had a great game, credit to him. But there are some plays that I watch Paolo and I think it's very LeBron-esque in how he's playing.
I don't see that. I see a young man. He's a bucket. He gets a basket. He can score. Now he's learning how to utilize passing. His If there's one thing that's really standing out with him, there's a lot of things, and we talked about it earlier. His patience, but he's excellent at faking passes now and faking shots. And I didn't realize that until I got to the NBA, how important shot faking is. Or you fake a pass, it kind of freezes everything. When you see a great scorer, first thing they do is they always fake.
D-Wade, Kobe.
They utilize fakes. So, and I was watching him last night. I was like, oh, he's beginning to study the blueprint. I've never, since we're talking about LeBron, I've never positioned him or classified him as a scorer. I never said, oh, he's a scorer. Yeah, and he's the all-time leading scorer, but I never said this guy's a certified scorer. He scores. I don't see him that way. So, when I watch players, I look at their mentality. Who are they? What do they do naturally? LeBron, what he does naturally, he just does a little bit of everything. He passes some, he scores some, he rebounds some, he blocks shots. Paolo is, he's a scorer. This guy can score. This guy's getting 50 points in the game now, early in the season. He's a big kid. He plays from the box. He plays below the free throw line. And what you love about the young players, we just talked about it with Chet. Chet's this year, you can see early in the season, he's playing through the contact. Well, Paolo kind of came into the league looking for the contact. So he plays through it, but he can score. And this is going to be tough for many years to come because he's a force now. And as he begins to understand the game even more to the degree that he's moving on, he may start doing these in the playoffs, Mo, and that's going to be a problem.
And who can match up with him? It's tough to have players that can match up with him.
Yeah, he's not a guy you can play with just a 6'6" guy. He can play if there was any comparison that he reminds me of is Melo. Because Melo was a scorer. Okay. Melo could pass, Melo could rebound, but who he truly was a scorer. And
well, you saw this last night against Indiana, right? When it was smaller players on him, he would take it to the rack. Even with Obi Toppin guarding him, who's a great athlete, he's shooting mid-range jumpers over him. Even with Siakam guarding him, he's taking it strong. There were possessions there where he'd finish in the paint over 2 defenders. And that then opened up the game for the rest of the team because the defense was so concerned about what Paolo was doing.
Yeah, he's a scorer. That's what he is. You don't realize he's a little bigger than you think too. He's like 6'9", 6'10", somewhere around there. He's a big kid. So, but he's some version of Melo. Melo would punish you on the offensive end. He was a bully, and I love that about him when Melo was playing. But this kid, man, he's pretty smooth. And ladies and gentlemen, he's here.
Absolutely.
He's here
well, on the other end of the floor, I want to give a shout out to Bilal Coulibaly, who did a great job guarding Trae Young last night for the Washington Wizards, who got that win over the Hawks. But I want to talk to you about the Cavs and the Knicks who played. The interesting one from that game is Karl-Anthony Towns only took 8 shots. And I don't remember a single game in Karl-Anthony Towns' career where he's taken that few shots. You have your 25 game rule to see how teams figure things out. But when you look at the kind of shot distribution with Jalen Brunson getting 24, Bridges 15, Anunoby 13, Josh Hart 10 in terms of shots, What have they got to be running to get Karl-Anthony Towns more looks? Do you want to see more on the block, more pick and pops? How do you want to see this going? Because they lost again last night to the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have a great front court with Mobley and Allen. But this is a team they could very well see maybe in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, it's going to take some time for the Knicks to figure out who they are. Okay. And you always take on I think for the most part, you take on the personality of your coach, and Coach Thibodeau, I've known him now for 30 plus years. And coach is a defensive, his the way he thinks about the game is he thinks about it from a defensive perspective. This team is not built in his personality, in my view, right? Because he wants guys like Josh Hart, DiVincenzo, Isaiah Hardenstein, and that's kind of
Well,
who he
two of the
is.
three are gone. So,
That's what
but you've
that's
got
what I'm saying.
OG and you got Bridges now.
Okay, you have OG, you have Bridges, but and those are really good players, but they're not his personality. Now, on paper, I think they did the deals because you had to do them. When I say you had to do them, it made sense why you did it, right? But when you start coaching, you get to your essence, you get to the core of who you are, and all of a sudden, Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns is a beautiful player. He's a unique player because of his size. And what does he do, Mo? He is a pick and pop guy. I've never looked at him as a defensive rim protector,
Hell
defensive
nah.
player who,
Hell
okay,
nah.
okay. So now what's the glaring thing about this team that you've watched in the first 2 or 3 games?
No rim protection.
Defensively and the rim protection. And that's solely his responsibility now. Karl Anthony Towns has been a 5, but he's always played next to someone that could do other things so that he never had to guard and just be the
Well, no, he
primary
did play
defensive
the
player.
five earlier on in his career at the Timberwolves, and it didn't really lead to much success.
When he started having success, he played next to
Yeah,
someone.
yeah. That's only the last 2 years.
Yes, he's always played next to someone because you could see, every player has something, right? And one of the things that he doesn't do well, even though he's 7 footer, is that's not his, that's not what he does. He's not trying to, some games maybe he could get 4 or 5 blocks, but he doesn't consistently do that. But what he can do is he can pick and pop with the best of them. That's what he can do. And then when you put another big next to him because of his ability to stretch the floor, he plays more like a perimeter player than a big guy. He's not a pick and roll guy, dive to the basket, seal, jump hook you. Now, can he do that? Yes. But what he can really do exceptionally well, Mo, is he can shoot that 3 ball with distance as well as any big that's probably come through this league. But he could shoot that ball now. Now, all of a sudden, Mo, when you pick and pop, you break down the spacing because what kind of offense are most teams playing? They're playing 5-out offense. So now the spacing is messed up. The other bigs, Isaiah Hardenstein, Mitchell Robinson, those were screen and rollers, which forces the team to have to sink their defense because you got to pick up the roll guy, and then you start spraying the ball, as they say. So right now, you can see that their spacing is kind of messed up. You could see right now, they're going through an adjustment period, learning how to play. I think they're going to be fine. But Mo, overall, it didn't look smooth last night. Now, Coach Thibodeau is going to make sure that he gets involved. I have no doubt about that. But I don't know what else they can do with him because of the way they play, right? They don't have anyone who's what we call a rim runner who can run get big, play there, force the defense to sink. So you give your drivers time to penetrate, pass out to the corners, do the things. This is a team now that is kind of They're going to have to figure out how to play and utilize the talents that they have. Coach Thibodeau is going to look at the film. I can assure you, he looked at it last night after the game. he probably was in the
Well,
gym at midnight
do you know something? Do
figuring
you know
it
something
out.
really cool that I read from the Cavs Jack? He said Kenny Atkinson, coach of the Cavs, only grabbed one clip at halftime, and it was a possession where the Knicks grabbed three straight offensive rebounds, and then he left the team to talk amongst themselves. And in the second half, the Cavs came out and out rebounded the Knicks 21-15. That's just
You know,
effort plays, regardless of the
yeah,
schemes you want to play and what you want to do with
you
Cat.
know,
That's just effort plays.
that's great to say. I didn't know that, but I watched that game and I remember the play that I started rumbling a little bit, as my family calls it. Why are you rumbling in there? What are you doing? There you go. I don't call names out. Sometimes I pretend like I'm coaching the team, and I'll just like. I remember my son was in here. He was eating, and he was like, "What? What happened?" And Jared Allen,
Yeah.
they rebounded over him like two times on one possession. And I thought, wow, this guy's like 7 feet, and they're just jumping over the top of him. It was happening in the first half. I vividly
Yeah.
remember that. It happened in the first half. And I thought, man, like, okay, if the other team is bigger than you, I can see you going over the top. It's hard to block out Wemby or someone every single time. But it was like Josh Hart rebounding over Jared Allen.
Yeah.
I remember the play.
Over the
And I
back.
thought, what is going on? And so good for the coaching staff for pointing that out, because a lot of times, well, it is just effort and energy. And that play kind of summed up the first half, and good for them. Good for the Cleveland coaching staff.
Your favorite Wemby got 20 rebounds last night, but and once again a lackluster kind of scoring night. 6 of 14 from the field, 1 of 5 from three.
I don't. I told you I do not like. I do not, especially in today's game, because of the way the game is played. Versatility is to be the best quality to have on a team. You just play people all around in different positions. You have to, the way the game is played. There is no such thing, with the exception of a few players who can actually dominate at their position. Jokic being one. Like, okay, but with how many of those players are there where you can say, I can put them in a position and they can dominate? The other players, you got to pull all around a little bit.
You
It's
create
like,
advantages.
yes, like Luka. Like Luka is a point forward guard of some sort, and you just kind of move him around.
Yeah.
Shea Alexander, you move him around. All of the Kevin Durant, you just move him around. LeBron James, you move him. Steph Curry, if you can't just put Steph Curry at the one, even though that's his size, you move him around. You kind of just you allow these players to kind of they just move around the game and they'll figure it out. That's why they're great players. I think putting Wembanyama at the center position limits what he can do, because I see them guarding him with smaller players. And I don't like, if he is the center and he is being guarded by Dylan Brooks, for instance, like he was last night. That to me just signifies that, you know what? Now I can double him and do things, because I'm not really worried
you know
about
what I
him
don't
just
like?
posting me up.
He took 14 shots last night. 6 of those were kind of jump shots outside the paint. And he was 1 of 6 on those jump shots. But Jeremy Sohan, that's my guy, but he took 19 shots. Wembanyama's got to be finding at least 20 shots a game. Now, you bought Chris Paul there, the guy who everyone loves to say is the best point guard and whatever. But you got to be finding Wembanyama for more than just 14 shots.
Again,
He had 14
I'm
points
just
on
watching.
14 shots. I'm trying to get more looks than that.
You got to move him around the game. Let the game dictate it. Like, he's not some big guy that has to play at a pace. He can play fast. If you give him the advantage, he should be able to play in the half court and utilize his size. He can play pick and pop. He can play pick and roll. You could put him in the corners to shoot the threes. You could do so much with him. You could go high low with him. You could, I mean, there's not a part of the game he can't play in, but you got to utilize him in that capacity. So I think they will figure that out. I really do. Because he's just, I mean, when you watch him, he's just such a unique player. You know, he should be able to play against the Denver Nuggets. He should be able to play against Michael Porter Jr. and play against Jokic and play against Aaron Gordon all in the same game.
Yeah.
Like, he, you know, he could you could put him anywhere on the floor and he will function. So, but you know, he's playing right now at the center position. I know he's a little stronger. I know he wants to play a little bit more physical, but a steady diet of that for a player of with his talent and ability, um, I I I I just think it would serve the team better and force the other teams to double team him, force the other
Hmm.
teams to you know to adjust to him. And I will say this: if you put him on the weak side on the defensive end, then that to me is a game changer. Because if he's allowed to float during the course of a game, float around on the floor and figure out and not have to guard the other team's best interior player all the time, now he can totally dominate a game.
Yeah.
You know, he can dominate it because he's bigger than Ben Wallace. He's bigger than those other guys who have figured it out. You know, once the Pistons got Rasheed Wallace, you know, Ben Wallace just, you know, he was already really good on the defensive end, and then all of a sudden now you're putting him on the weak side. You put Dennis Rodman and these guys, and you allow them to just, you know, guard the player where they're going to be the best defensive player, but also they're going to be the best team defensive player.
Hmm.
That to me is a game changer, and you got to do that with him because he should be just on a whole nother level.
Well,
We should be talking about him as one of the greatest defensive players of all time,
let's
for
see.
sure.
They've got what, 20, 23 games, 22 games before we can give a real assessment. But the good news is the Lakers lost last night. Fantastic news for you, BJ.
Man,
That's
that
your
was a good game.
first.
I watched that game. I watched that
Yep.
game too. That was
Yep.
a really good game.
That
It
was a
was
good
a
game right down to the
tie. It was
wire.
a yeah, it came right down. It was a really, really
And
good
the
game.
process that the Lakers have is actually pretty good. But they did lose, which means you got your first win on the board in terms of a prediction against me this season. However, the bad news
Oh,
for you is the Pistons lost to the Heat. So I'm now up 6-1. But we're going to
okay,
do
okay,
tonight's picks and see how that goes. And we start with a
okay.
tough one. The Mavs at the Wolves. Both teams are currently 2-1.
Mavs. I'm gonna go the Wolves.
I'm going with the Wolves because the Mavs played last night. I'm going to go with the new look Timberwolves shooting more threes, more off-ball screens. I'm gonna see how that goes. The Nuggets looked horrible once again against the Raptors last night. They took them to overtime, and then Scotty Barnes didn't play the overtime, so the Nuggets won. But tonight they get an easier task, or perceived easier task, because the Nets just took out the Bucks. But the Nuggets are playing the Nets tonight on the road in Brooklyn. Who have you got for that?
I'm gonna say Nets.
Okay.
I'm gonna say Nets. I'm gonna say Nets. Just that's a long trip. First game. I'm gonna say Nets. Something's going. Well, we know what's going on in Denver. You know, there's just that's hard. It's hard when you lose two, three starters or
And it's like
key
Jamal
players.
Murray is not the same guy that you see in the playoffs. You know what I mean? Like he had an amazing layup to take the game to overtime, but outside of that, his performances so far this season have been pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, it's you know when you sometimes when you find things that work, you just got to stick with them.
Yep.
And Caldwell Pope was a terrific player to put alongside someone like Jamal Murray.
Yeah, but also
And
this fit of Russell Westbrook, I'm not a huge fan of. Like in the preseason, I was excited, but I've not seen that same stuff in the regular season.
got to give it time, Mo. You got to give that one time. You know, Russell is in some regard has always been a slow starter. He's always been a slow starter throughout his entire career. And you know what you're going to get with him. Now, the only thing that he's got to adjust to is where Russell was really you saw it when he first went to Houston. Russell has always been the primary ball handler for many years, 10, 11 years or
His whole
so in
career,
OKC.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Then when he went to Houston, it was a shared responsibility with him and James Harden. Then when he went to the Lakers, or no, then he went back to
Wizards.
Washington. Yes, the ball came back to it in his hand, and he put up massive numbers there. Then he went from there to the Lakers, and they took the ball out of his hand again. I think this is going to be even a more difficult transition for Russell because Jokic is the primary ball handler. Okay. Which means if you can't shoot consistently from the perimeter, it's going to be tough to play with him because he plays from all three spots. He plays from the perimeter, shoots threes. I think he made like 5 or 6 the other night or something like that. We know he can play from the post and he plays from the mid range. So you're forced to play on the perimeter with him or cut to the basket. And I think that's going to take time for Russell to figure that out because that's not the strength of his game. So it's going to take some time. I want to be patient because you know he's going to work at it. But right now, and when you're losing, you start looking at stats immediately. I mean, Jokic, what he had like 40. He's had some big games early in the season.
I'm going to pick the Nuggets to win this one just because the
Yeah.
Nets are missing like 3, 4 players out of rotation. So I'm
Oh,
going to go
okay.
with the
Well,
Nuggets.
that's a good one. Good call.
Kings Jazz. The Jazz yet to
Kings.
pick up a win so far this season. The Kings played last night.
Kings.
Okay. Even though they're going from Sacramento to Utah today.
Yeah, that's an easy flight. That's easy flight. The Kings need this game. The
Yeah.
Kings
They're 1-2 right now.
Yeah, they need this game. All right. I think they got their first win. Their first win was last night. All right. Did I
Yeah.
see DeMar
Light the
beam
beam.
the light? Yeah, light the beam or something. Yeah. What I said,
Okay.
beam the light, light the beam.
Beam the light. Yeah. The last one for tonight is Pelicans Warriors. Who have you got?
I got the Pels. I don't know if Steph Curry's playing or not, but I'm gonna go with the Pels in that game.
Steph Curry is going to be reevaluated on Friday, so I don't know
Okay.
if he'll be active. If he's not active, I'm going with the Pels. If he's playing, I might be tempted to go with the Warriors, but I'll go with the Pelicans for now. So we'll have a look tonight. It should be a good game. The Mavs and the Wolves. I'm looking forward to that one, and we'll be back tomorrow to chop it up. I'm looking forward to it already, BJ. Looking forward.
You're looking forward to
already.
it. You're looking forward to the
Always,
game.
always,
Yes. Love it.
always. This is what
Love
we
it.
do. Yeah. Stay tuned. To
Yeah.
Luke
Oh, I
G's
want to
YouTube,
say before we
for
get
the
out of
Paolo
here.
breakdown. Go ahead.
Yeah. Want to give a shout out, goodwill soon to the kid Taylor Hendricks.
Oh, that was a horrible
Yeah.
injury.
Yeah, just speedy recovery for the Utah Jazz, and as you know, Mo, I don't like to see anyone get hurt, and but speedy recovery. That's going to be a long recovery, and hopefully he gets back on the floor. Very promising young player with a bright future ahead of him, and hopefully he'll come back from this injury and be able to play and continue his career. So really just wanted to give a shout out to him, his family, and that he gets back out there on the court. I got a chance to, I got some clients out there who play for the Jazz. So I got a chance to see him, and hopefully he gets back out there on the floor and continues his career next season. Because I think it's going to, at the very least, he's going to be out for this year.
Absolutely, man. Hoping he has a good recovery process. Because that injury, if you haven't seen it yet, I advise not searching it because it's absolutely horrible. But that's another episode. So make sure you subscribe, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast from. And until next time, get buckets.